There are few things crazier than when a fight is basically already over and going to a decision, but then right at the buzzer, somebody gets completely flatlined or submitted. You guys know exactly what I'm getting at and what the inspiration is here, and I've seen a few others cover this, but I tried to go a step further, because when I say last second for this list, I literally mean exactly that. The final round, 0 time left in the entire fight. No messing around on this one, and not just the UFC, so let's get right into it. I'm Jason from MMA On Point. A huge shout out to our Hall of Famers. You guys are awesome and help us come up with ideas and really support the channel. And today I'm breaking down 10 incredible literal last second finishes in MMA history. Number 10, Melinda Fabian versus Carla Benitez. So let's head straight to, as McGregor would say, the back ass of nowhere. That's right, we're going to Hungary, which just so happened to be headlined by McGregor's final Cage Warriors opponent, actually Ivan Buchinger. The co-main event, however, is a little-known fight between Carla Benitez and Melinda Fabian, or Fabian, depending on if you go by the announcer or how the UFC used to say it, because you might recognize Fabian from her stint on The Ultimate Fighter that didn't go so well. But she's had a lot more success in karate combat lately. Funny enough, she's introduced as a submission specialist for this fight, even though she's definitely a striker.
This woman is a submission specialist!
I guess she does have a few submissions, but that's ignoring a lot of info there. Her opponent Benitez doesn't have the best record, but has literally fought all around the world with Bellator and Cage Warriors, but even crazier, she fought Zhang Weili in China back in 2016. So you can see why they were the co-main with this level of experience and a bit of name value on a card otherwise full of lesser known talents. And the fight wasn't bad for the first couple rounds, mostly just Fabian picking apart Benitez on the outside, but Benitez was clearly down by the third, so she really started to come forward and even drew a bit of blood, prompting some stiff counters from Fabian, but Benitez was really starting to have success in the process. And what else can you say? She got a little too aggressive in those last few seconds, and that's when this happened. Wow, doesn't get much cleaner than that, folks. Like the title says, at 4:59 of the round. Number 9, Samy Hawk versus Jamal Raja. You know, this one is a bit weird for me to talk about because it's actually a fight myself and Alex, or Bailey, and as you know him, did commentary for the fight. But that doesn't make it any less deserving. It took place for FCC 35 Full Contact Contender in Liverpool, England in September of 2023. This was an amateur championship fight for the featherweight title. Samy Hawk is a classically undersized man for the division, but at 9-0, it's never really caused him any problems, and his opponent Jamal is a perfect example of just how big that size difference is. If you've never seen Samy fight, he's a super aggressive striker with a ton of intensity, which translates to his ground game super well. Jamal did a great job shutting his ground game down for the most part and giving as good as he got on the feet throughout all the rounds. It was looking like this might even come down to the 5th to decide the whole thing. Watching live, I had no idea who the judges were actually favoring on this one.
A minute to go. These fighters want it really badly.
That's when Samy caught the most clutch takedown ever at the end of the rounds and managed this at the very last second.
10 seconds goes for a guillotine. That looks tight.
Oh, that looks tight.
Really tight. It looks like this is a...
Wow!
Is he calling a tap?
He tapped!
You can literally see me and Alex both flipping out here behind them when this happens. I truly don't intend this to be a promo to come watch FCC. I'm just making a list like normal, but these are the kind of fights that they put on, so come check us out on Fight Pass sometime. We were absolutely losing our minds. Number 8, Yoel Romero versus Alex Polizzi. One of the last frontiers of MMA's legalization in recent years has been France. There are still a few to go, but it took a shockingly long time to get things going there, and so when events finally started being held there, well, it's fair to say it was a pretty huge deal, and in the case of Bellator's only second ever event in the country, it was mostly memorable for all the wrong reasons. Whoever thought Ryan Bader versus Chet Congo was a good idea for a main event, yeah, that was a bad choice. Thankfully, though, they did have Yoel Romero to add some wild to the main card as he faced off against a 10-1 prospect and Alex Polizzi, and sure enough, Yoel delivered. Alex had mostly come out to wrestle and control, but Yoel, as an Olympian, wasn't giving him anything. Still, Alex was looking alright through most of the first rounds, but by the second, it only took about 10 seconds for Yoel to start landing bombs on him. And again, just a few moments later. But then towards the end of the seconds, that's when the truly first explosive shot landed.
Left hand lands. Polizzi's being worn down here. He's there to be finished.
And yeah, you already know what this list is about, but by this point, you were questioning if Polizzi was going to make it to the final bell at all. Yoel, being the guy he is, for some reason decided to take his foot off the gas, but just as suddenly, he dropped Alex again. To make matters worse, Alex's legs were completely chopped up. It started to really feel around this point that Yoel was just playing with his food, almost daring Alex to try literally anything. That's when the final 10-second warning sounded and Yoel just went for it. It felt like he could have done that at any time. I don't know why he waited so long. And even though the bell had sounded just after that, the ref Mike Beltran waved it off. I mean, what a chin on Alex to pop back up after that though. Number 7, Carlos Hernandez versus Denise Bondar. The ending on this one is truly crazy. This was the third fight on Hernandez's UFC record back in 2023, which somehow meant it was still at the pandemic apex. When are we ever going to stop seeing cards there?
Mind your business.
Anyhow, Hernandez was taking on Denise Bondar, who hadn't had as much luck in the UFC with only a single fight that he'd lost. Either way, there isn't a huge backstory to this one. Through 3 rounds, Hernandez had done a great job imposing his boxing heavy striking on Bondar. There was a tad bit of clinching, but not much else. Hernandez was solidly up 2 rounds to nothing. There was an unintentional knee that landed at the end of the second for Bondar as well. But crazy enough though, Hernandez would perhaps get his revenge as he threw Bondar to the mat, and as they were hitting the floor, he got the finish. Even crazier though was that on review from the replay, it was revealed that their heads clashed.
That was a real legit throw. I mean, this happens in grappling all the time.
Totally unintentional, so it had to go to the decision instead of being a KO blow ruled a DQ, which of course Hernandez was already up, so he won anyway. But either way, he still finished Bondar officially, illegally or not, at 4:59 of the final round. Number 6, Grant Dawson versus Leonardo Santos. For the greater part of the last decade, Grant Dawson has been a big prospect in the UFC. Recent setbacks aside, a large reason for that is based on his completely smothering performances on the ground as a wrestling standout and a BJJ black belt under James Krause. Never mind that part, but a perfect example is the prowess that was shown off against Leonardo Santos, who was far more credentialed as a BJJ world champ level grappler. And he dealt with the wrestling game of Dawson, as you might imagine, really well.
Meanwhile, Santos finds his way on top here.
So this led to much of the fight taking place on the feet, and by the end of the second, Santos looked to be taking over. Fast forward to a tough corner moment with a squeaky clean James Krause, and there was definitely concern in his corner.
Don't leave this to the judges. I want you to leave this all here. You got 5 minutes. I want you to try to knock his fucking head off. Do you understand me?
Something must have worked here, because it was shortly after the third started that he finally scored some top control. And with desperation on his side, he really got after it with ground and pounds, and while posturing up in the remaining seconds,
seconds.
To date, it's probably Grant Dawson's best win, and I mean, how can you really top a last second KO like that? Number 5, Merab Dvalishvili versus Ricky Simone. Few fight moments will ever be more memorable than the ending of this fight, but since it was before Merab was the star he's become now, and Many just didn't see it back then, or newer fans weren't watching the sport when this happened back in 2018. Tack on top of that, this was only his second fight in the promotion, and Ricky Simone was also just debuting. But the pace in this fight was just insane. But it was mostly the aggression of Merab throughout the first couple rounds that was winning out. In the third, both men were understandably showing a fair amount of fatigue with that kind of pacing, but that was when the last minute of the fight, Merab got a bit reckless with a takedown attempt and immediately got stuck in a guillotine.
Oh, he's got the reversing things. He's got the guillotine.
And what happened here is truly one of the most bizarre attempts to survive a submission I've ever seen. From the point of 53 seconds left in the final round, Merab proceeded to essentially butterfly kick continuously for the remainder of the final 53 seconds in the hopes of keeping himself alive or perhaps even alleviate some pressure.
My goodness, look at his legs.
What is going on there?
After it was going so well.
And yeah, it kind of appeared to work. That was until we saw Simone get off of him. Especially in the replay, you can see nobody was home here.
Time ran out, and boy, he looked out to me.
The officials debated about it cage side for a couple minutes before officially ruling it as a TKO, because that's the designation for an ad hoc call on a finish like this. So yeah, good luck to anybody beating a time of 5 minutes for a TKO finish. Crazy fight. Number 4, Demetrious Johnson versus Kyoji Horiguchi. Now we are getting into the downright legendary territory with these fights. This is while DJ was still in the UFC and was in the midst of building up his record-breaking consecutive title defense streak back in 2015. He was facing a young up-and-comer who the world was just still getting to know in Kyoji Horiguchi, who's become a legend in his own right through his Ryzen and Bellator World Championship reigns as a true major star. And at this point, he was already showing off all that potential. As a challenger, he was a breath of fresh air. But the truth is, watching this one back, you wouldn't know that. DJ, being the legend he is, was just on a different level. And he really dominated this fight from bell to bell, wearing down Horiguchi as every second passed. And in the last 20 seconds of the fight, he managed to get Kyoji in a crucifix, and it looked like he'd finally be put out of his misery.
This is the spot that he wanted to get to.
Yeah, final 15 seconds.
He might finish it here.
But then with only about 5 seconds left, DJ switched gears and history was made.
It's all over! Unbelievable! It's all over! Johnson by submission!
He's the best.
To date, after nearly 10 years since this has happened, this is still the latest finish for a traditional divisional UFC title fight, and good luck matching or breaking that one anytime soon. Incredible. Number 3, Magomed Ankalaev versus Paul Craig.
Doesn't it make you proud to be Scottish?
How do you top one of the most legendary submissions from one of the most legendary fighters? Well, you do it with what might be the most incredible Hail Mary comeback of all time that of course also happened to take place at the very last second of the fight. This of course was the debut of Magomed Ankalaev, and when I say he was hyped up in his debut, believe me, it was for good reason. The guy was a master of sport in Sambo, winning gold in many tournaments, and even won amateur MMA bouts to include, notably, Bellator's champ Vadim Nemkov. He was undefeated as a pro, was coming off of 3 straight KO/TKOs as a champion already in Russia, and here he was against Paul Craig, who himself had just been finished in his last 2 fights and up against a fighter with plenty of ground and stand-up skills to squash him. It was honestly pretty hard to see Craig having much of a chance here. And to the commentary's credit, Dan Hardy pointed out a bit of notable foreshadowing.
Master of combat sports in combat sambo.
But at the same time, he has no submissions on his record that have been recorded, so he's much more about finding his grappling positions to strike than submit.
But as the fight went on, Craig was getting controlled and battered. He's even said since that he was essentially thinking this was going to be the end of his career with what was looking like an imminent 3rd loss in a row. The writing was on the wall here. That's when one of the most incredible things I've ever seen in the sport happens, as Craig was leaking blood on the canvas and punches were being rained down on him with 7 seconds left. A fight he had scarcely won even a second of. Well...
Oh, look at this!
Big triangle set up.
Yeah, it doesn't get much more dramatic than that, folks. Wow. Oh wait, I got 2 more entries to go, never mind. Number 2, Yair Rodriguez versus the Korean Zombie. And keeping in line with comebacks, this was the 25th anniversary for the UFC for their main event, and it delivered with legitimately one of their best fights ever. The fight basically went like this. Over the course of 4 rounds, the two bloodied each other in an insane back and forth fight, with Chan Sung Jung doing enough in most rounds to steal them away. We have the benefit of looking back now at the judges' scorecards, and while one did have them tied at 2 rounds apiece, the other 2 had Korean Zombie up 3 rounds to 1 going into the 5th. And watching this back myself for the video, I would fully agree with that. But as that one other judge that did have it a tie, it proves that you can never be too sure who's winning, and both men seem to know that, going into their craziest round with more back and forth momentum than perhaps the rest of the fight combined. This being at elevation in Denver, both were definitely sharing high levels of exhaustion, to the extent that both men almost stood in the center of the cage solely to embrace that fact before going at it for one final flurry.
Oh, nice body kick. One more flurry.
Hohlfelder's reaction to the KO on replay when he finally saw what happened pretty much sums it up.
It was an elbow. Oh my God.
The creativity on the part of Rodriguez is nothing short of breathtaking. To come back from that kind of deficit he had here and find it in him to do that will forever go down as one of the truly greatest KOs in the entire sport's history. But of course, there has to be one to top it, and that is number 1, Max Holloway versus Justin Gaethje.
Oh my God, what a shock.
I'm sure some will argue that this is recency bias to put this at number 1, and what Yair did was more impressive, but man, this was nothing short of incredible. I've said it a few times now, but I was very much not into BMF 2.0. It was this organic thing that Diaz and Masvidal set up themselves, which the UFC then got behind. Gaethje and Poirier are absolutely 2 BMFs, but this time it was the UFC setting it up, and it felt like something they were doing to sell a card more than anything. And coming into this one after seeing what happened in the Poirier interim title fight versus Holloway a few years prior, and yes, it is MMA math, but Dustin did just lose to Justin Gaethje. So the assumption was that Holloway would run into a lot of the same problems he did with Poirier, but this time with an even harder puncher. Boy, was I wrong and anybody else who bought into this theory. Holloway not only dominated Gaethje over the course of 5 rounds, but he also hurt him several times, and despite having the opportunity to coast, I mean, he was clearly ahead here, he chose to risk it all with the on-paper scarier power puncher and essentially gave him a shot to throw his best punch, only to flip the script at the literal last second like everyone else on this list, but he absolutely stole the show. We are truly blessed to have Max Holloway in this sport. My God. What a video, guys. Some of the best moments this sport has ever seen, especially towards the end there. A special shout out to our channel Hall of Famers in this one, because my guy Troz actually came up with this idea last week during our writers meeting. So if you are interested in something like that, that's a great reason to sign up on top of all the exclusive content you get every week as a channel member. So yeah, there you go. But guys, that's it for me. Enjoy the rest of your week. Peace.